The Business Journal Roundtable series is sponsored by iSynergy, creative digital advertising.
Morning, Emil Liszniansky with Envision. I'm a consultant for Eastgate Regional Council Governments and their Special Projects Coordinator, so heading up this repopulation effort on their behalf.
I think that everybody needs to speak up. Project as best you can. Thank you, Emil.
Good morning. My name is Christopher Colon. I'm the co-founding director of Thrive Mahoning Valley. We work on welcoming and specifically in the immigration and refugee space.
Good morning. My name is Jake Rickert. I'm the director of workforce development for Penn-Northwest Development Corporation. We're over in Mercer County, Pennsylvania.
Good morning, I'm Lisa Long. I'm the Financial Resource Development Director and CEO-designate for the Youngstown Area Jewish Federation. We're on the north side of Youngstown and run several agencies up there. We were actually founded to welcome refugees back at the end of World War II from the Holocaust and continue refugee work to this day as part of many of the efforts that we undertake.
Hi, I'm Nancy Voitus. I'm the Executive Director of Catholic Charities Regional Agency. We cover Columbiana, Mahoning, and Trumbull counties and have a variety of services, everything from basic needs and emergency assistance to working with homeless to seniors. And we work with the Diocese of Cleveland on legal immigration services and are looking at other resources as well around the issue of refugee resettlement.
My name is Julie Michael Smith, and I am supporting Mahoning Valley Manufacturers Coalition, which is an industry sector partnership representing regional manufacturers in the Mahoning Valley with a specific interest and laser focus on workforce development issues. I am also managing a project in Western Pennsylvania for Lawrence and Mercer counties. They too, their regional manufacturers are coalescing around an industry sector partnership, which they've recently formed as well to hopefully emulate MVMC's success here in the Valley.
I'm Jim Kinnick. I'm the Executive Director at Eastgate Regional Council of Governments. We're the Metropolitan Planning Organization for Mahoning and Trumbull counties. Some of our work when it comes to councils of government expands up into Ashtabula. Most people think of us as the transportation planners. We do that. We think we do that very well. We are also the representatives for the Economic Development District in Ohio, in our region in Ohio. And we also are the lead for the Appalachian region, which makes up Ashtabula, Mahoning, and Trumbull counties. When I referenced the transportation effort, we've expanded our efforts in really into the space of economic development, working with our regional partners such as the Chamber and the Port Authority and those efforts. Hence, one of the opportunities was to bring on some expertise with Emil. He's a contract employee with us and also operates as a consultant too on some of our other initiatives. So we're trying to expand our role, get into the space of economic development, which gets us into the space of the repopulation of the effort in the Valley.
I'm Guy Coviello, President and CEO of the Youngstown Warren Regional Chamber. We are the third largest metro chamber of commerce in Ohio with about 3,000 members. They employ about 150,000 workers in and around the Mahoning Valley. We've seen unprecedented opportunities to grow our economy. The number one barrier has been workforce, and so we've taken up growing the population as a top priority in order for us to build the workforce and keep up with the demand that's in the community.
Hello, my name is Angelica Diaz. I am the Executive Director of OCCHA. OCCHA is a nonprofit organization in the city of Youngstown. We've been in the city of Youngstown for over 52 years. We provide a variety of services, social services to the Hispanic and to the multicultural community.
Very good. Thank you all. So typically we begin with, typically we go around the table and begin with, I think we'll start with Emil again, if you don't mind. Oh, actually, maybe we'll start with Guy. I think I'll start with Guy because this is Guy's bailiwick. Why is repopulation vital to the future of our region and economic prosperity? What do the demographics show?
So post-COVID, we have seen a record number of leads for economic development projects. We see significant job growth coming to this community, and we see it from very large companies. So if we think about the announcement we made in December that Kimberly-Clark is coming here for a manufacturing operation. Kimberly-Clark is a Fortune 100 company. They provide great pay, great benefits, great working conditions. Foxconn has put a stake in the ground here, and we anticipate significant growth from Foxconn. Foxconn is a Fortune 3 company, third largest employer in the world, 1.2 million employees. They provide great pay and benefits for their employees. Those companies are going to get their workers. They have the wherewithal to do whatever it takes to get their workers. If we don't grow the population to provide those workers, they're coming from our existing small family-owned mom-and-pop operations that will simply close. There's no way they could survive. There's no way they can compete. So we've taken up, in order to protect our members, we've taken up this as the number one priority for this community from an economic development standpoint. Having these large companies like Kimberly-Clark and Foxconn come here could actually hurt our economy if it forces other companies that are the lifeblood of our community, the owners are in the community, to suffer.
Again, I'm going to ask everybody to speak up. I could see where Mary was straining a little bit. Okay, well, we're going to come back to you, Angelica, but let's talk to Jim now.
Sure. Just to build on what Guy referenced, we've had 5 decades of population loss. If you just look at the city of Youngstown, was a city of 160,000 people. It's down to 60,000. So this shows you we already have a shortage of people in the area. Now you turn around and bring additional businesses and commitments to the area, investment to the area, we'd have that worker shortage. I think when you also look at the median age of the worker, and they talk about locally, we're at 43.7 years old when the average is 39% or 39 years old. So we have an older workforce. Older workforces are retiring. We don't have that younger workforce. It really just magnifies the need to keep younger people in our area or bring younger people back to our area. And I think when we talk a lot about the 3 R's of repopulation, I think a lot of the focus goes to refugees and bringing immigrants here, which is certainly an effort we have to take on. But retaining our young people and returning our young people to the area is vital also. And probably the quicker fix when you talk about the efforts we're going to talk about deeper into this conversation about immigration and refugees, the quicker fix is certainly to focus on the younger workers and keeping those people here and bringing those people back here.
I'm going to call on Jake.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you look at the population, that's a leading factor in the economic health of a region. A healthy, growing population stimulates economic opportunities, higher income, availability to economic resources, recreation, innovation. A great example is Austin, Texas. So they're growing at a rate of around 50,000 people per year inflowing into their city. And it's all under the guise of Keep Austin Weird, this culture base that they have there. And they're getting men and women of all ages. In contrast, Mercer County has lost about 30,000 people over the last 40 years. And this has led to some significant shortages in our workforce. The capabilities of our manufacturing and healthcare industries have declined. Another con, is our overall tax base and representation at the state and federal legislature. It's increasingly important that we keep young people here and we retain the young adults attending our local education systems. The average age in Mercer County is around 45 years old. With that, in the next 10 to 15 years, some of those core individuals, those core leaders, the champions of industry that these businesses have been relying on, they're going to retire. And we don't have skilled or experienced young men and women to step into those roles when they leave. This is a problem that's increasing, it's growing, and we really have to find a solution to attract and retain these young men and women.
I'm calling on people for a purpose. First, I want to set up the problem, and then we're going to talk to some of the agencies that are working on it. But let's go to Julie.
From the manufacturing perspective, we are sensitive and interested in all 3 R's, but as Jake has initiated the conversation, we're very focused on retaining youth and keeping them in our community. And, very specifically in terms of manufacturing, how do we make those types of careers appealing to young individuals? And then beyond that, how do we create a community that's attractive for young individuals? I was talking to my son last night because I was telling him about this event this morning, and he's 20 years old and he's away at college, as are most of his friends. And he said that most of them, that they love the community, they want to come back here at some point, but they feel like that they grew up here, they've experienced everything, they want to spend time away, and then when it's time for them to raise a family, they want to come back to the community at that point. Now, time and conditions and other circumstances may intercede, but they do feel that sense of they want to come back to the community, but after they've gone someplace else where they've had new experiences and new opportunities. So how do we create a culture and a community that provides those ongoing opportunities and interests for our young adults? And specific to manufacturing, which is a whole nother issue, how do we attract young individuals into those manufacturing jobs? As Guy mentioned with Kimberly-Clark and Foxconn and Altium, those are very large companies that have the wherewithal to attract employees, but even they will face some challenges because oftentimes manufacturing is not seen as the desirable position. Many individuals don't even know what manufacturing is. They think things just come on an Amazon truck. They don't understand how things are actually made, and that's a significant challenge as well. And hopefully part of the solutions we can talk about here today.
So Emil, what type of advice are you providing?
Well, I think the first step is we really have to look at what other communities have done, what's worked, what hasn't. And one of those things and examples is Utica, New York, upstate, post-industrial, legacy Rust Belt community that went from 100,000 peak population down all the way to 40,000. So they lost a lot of people, very similar to the Youngstown story. And what they did was went all in on embracing refugees. This started back in about 1980. And since then, they've started to slowly build their population upward. A quarter of all their residents now are foreign-born, which is dramatic for a place that had very little of that beforehand. And what they did was created a welcome center. And we're kind of using this model to have a similar multifaceted facility here in Youngstown that would not just welcome the refugees and work on their cases, but also connect them to employment through a preferred employment program, connect them with housing resources, connect them with wraparound services. A refugee coming into the country is very likely to never have dealt with things like debt and taxes the way we do in our country. Usually in other countries, these things are taken care of. Taxes are just withheld. Things like healthcare. How do you access our healthcare system? Most countries have single payers. So these are all things that would be addressed in our Welcome Center.
Lisa, you've been doing this, your agency's been doing this since the Holocaust. So what works, what doesn't work?
Sure. So we've been doing things very similar to Emil, realizing that we can't do this alone. So we've recently partnered with the chamber and been sitting on the steering committee there, given a multi-year commitment to their efforts as well in a grant. We've been working with the chamber and talking to communities that have been doing these efforts because there's a lot of communities like ours. So why reinvent the wheel? Let's learn from communities who are doing this. And so we've been very fortunate to be able to reach out to Jewish communities who have been doing this. CKC in Kansas City, Tulsa Tomorrow, Boomerang Greensboro, who've really been modeling this. We were able to do this on a small scale during the Ukraine crisis and bring in some refugees during the Ukraine crisis. And so we have expertise in that area as well. And so we've really been looking at modeling that. We did this during the 80s and bringing in former Soviet Jews from the former USSR and bringing in what we called kind of Moscow to the Mahoning and settling quite a few families here. I mean, we're concerned about about the same things that Guy and the Chamber are, that a lot of our community within the Jewish community is made up of very strong multi-generational family businesses. And if our family businesses lose employees and their kids are going to bigger cities, then what happens? And so our campus on the north side, which serves the Jewish community, but the grander community as well. We like to say that we serve baby to bubby. We have an early learning center all the way up to a nursing home, and we serve people of all faiths. And we were built to serve 8,000 people, and we're down to 1,200 Jewish people in a 5-county area. And so we're looking to bring in and bring back more Jewish families to this area, and really bring back families of all faiths, because if we can make Youngstown a better place for all of us to live, then it'll attract all families. And, with a rising tide, all of our ships go up. And so we've been, really working through our Thomas's Family Endowment that gives grants to local organizations to really try and enhance the quality of life here in Youngstown, to attract young families back to this area, or really make sure that the people stay here. My family is a success story too. My husband grew up here in Columbiana County. Never thought he'd move back here. And we moved back here 12 years ago. I mean, I'm not back. I grew up in Chicago, but I couldn't be happier. Moving back to Chicago was never even on our radar. Moving back here always was. And so, the opportunities that you can have here professionally and for your kids is just amazing. And getting that story out there, because I think a lot of times we think that it's really glass half empty here, and it really is glass half full. And so really getting that story out there and showing everything that we have. But I think that a lot of our organizations have been trying it on our own. And so I think that we finally have this groundswell effort of all of us working together, and that's what it's going to take, because we can't do it on our own. We need to put all of our efforts together to make a big splash effort. And I think that there's a lot of models out there to show us what works and what doesn't, so it'll save us from some of our mistakes.
Nancy, your organization, Catholic Charities, has been in this so-called business since the turn of the century, even before, actually. The church was instrumental in settling the earliest immigrants into our industry.
Yeah, certainly, as Jim referenced, refugee resettlement is one aspect of this whole repopulation effort. But I think an important aspect, as Emil has pointed out, how other communities have been able to grow from this effort. So certainly we want to be part of that. As Lisa mentioned, we want to be partners in this. Currently, the Diocese of Youngstown has a contract with the Diocese of Cleveland for immigration legal services, where we have somebody assigned to this area where we're working with them on becoming legal, on correcting, documentation efforts and retaining them in this community in their status. When we're talking about recruiting in the form of refugee resettlement, I think it's important for the community to understand that we're talking about refugees who are people that are leaving their home country for a variety of reasons, but usually because they are forced or compelled because of different reasons. So we want to be that welcoming community, because they're leaving, and like Emil said, they don't know this this culture. So we want to be that welcoming community that we can bring them in and help them with all of these things, like housing, like education, like employment. These are people that have left their country because of either violence or threat or harm, and they're looking to have a better life, and we want to be part of that effort to have them have a better life.
Angelica, I promised we'd come back to you, so now this is the perfect segue, because you're in the trenches. You're helping people that are coming in, and tell us what you're seeing.
Yeah, so we are the hands and feet, right? We do the work. So since 1972, OCCHA was created because people, the Latino community was coming in from Puerto Rico, and they were coming here and they had different struggles. And so we created OCCHA. And so OCCHA is that place where the families can come and get those wraparound services, food, clothing. Whenever families come into the area, they don't know where to go. They don't know how to navigate the system. And so that's where our staff comes in and helps them navigate the system, whether it be housing, whether it be employment. So like I said, we've been doing this since 1972, and we still provide, and we're still doing this today. We see a need when these families come into our communities, they need that support. And so agencies like ours, like Catholic Charities, are so important and so vital, just to make sure that these families not only just come here, but are able to put roots in and be self-sufficient.
This brings us to the political question, because part of recruiting new residents is attracting immigrants and refugees. And in today's political environment, immigration has a negative connotation. How do you address that? How do we get the community to rally around perhaps inviting the undocumented, the dreamers, and work with people to give them the skills? Guy, that's the $60,000 question.
So I would start by saying we are not in support of welcoming undocumented. We're not in support of welcoming the dreamers. We're not in support of anything that is going to stress social services and not be somebody that our members can hire. Our members cannot legally hire an undocumented person. So we are very careful to use the term legal immigration, and making sure that we're attracting the people, the refugees, through programs like Catholic Charities, where there is a very thorough vetting process, and we're bringing people that are going to be self-sufficient. Through the Jewish Federation, which has a long-standing history of accomplishing this. Using the Jewish Federation as an example to the naysayers that don't want us doing what we're trying to do here in terms of immigrants and refugees, by saying, look, where would this community be if, that many years ago we didn't welcome refugees from World War II? And think about the people in this community, multiple generations of business owners and taxpayers and citizens that have made this community what it is. So we want to be very careful about that from our perspective. We are very careful using, like I said, the term legal immigration. On a personal note, my kids are foreign born, and we went through a very thorough, expensive process to bring them here legally. And so personally, I don't like the idea of others not having to gone through that process. But we want to help our members get employees, and documented citizens are the answer.
Do you run into any pushback from members thinking, oh, repopulation, I don't want the chamber getting involved in that?
I get a lot of support from our members. I could use more MVMC, because I think the community needs to hear it from the people who run our factories that they need this, because we get it from citizens. We get it from ordinary people saying we don't want immigration in our community. And so we have to educate the community on the importance of this. And it's not going to be easy. I met last week with a representative from another town in Ohio that has had a significant Bhutanese population move into that town. And there are cultural differences that we need to help folks get through. They were telling me about how in Bhutan, when you get pulled over by a police officer, you put your hands in your pockets. That's a recipe for disaster in the U.S. And so educating that community's police force and educating the immigrants that moved in about how to handle that situation. So there's things like that we need to keep thinking of that are part of it. But
Let's open up the discussion. Who'd like to chime in?
We've talked quite a bit with Guy and his team as well of creating those cultural welcomes as well as you're bringing in folks, either refugees or the term used when you were bringing in people from Ukraine, they were called parolees. But even if you're bringing in people from different parts of the country, making sure they have, for lack of a better term, like a cultural welcome, so that wherever they're coming from, even from different parts of the country, that they feel welcome here, whether that's from their faith background or their ethnic background, that they are given a place to land. And so that the foods that folks are used to eating, the ways that they're used to worshiping, so that they're welcomed into the community in the right way, so that this feels like home is crucial. So they're not just coming here for a job and then maybe here for a little bit and then moving on to the next place, and then we're just setting ourselves up for the same problem in a few years. And so really, what can we do for those wraparound services to make sure that we're a really good landing spot, whether that's the Welcome Center or in other ways of setting up our residents to really welcome them and give them a nest, so to speak.
I'm sorry.
Please.
I think the education effort is important too, and Guy really pointed out, I think the community needs to understand the difference, and this is something I really learned in the last year, the difference between a refugee and a migrant and a undocumented. I think there's sort of this, that people lump everybody into this thought that they are all illegals, swimming across the Gulf of Mexico. And that's not the situation. I mean, most of us probably in this room, I know my grandparents are all directly from Italy. They came over for whatever reason into this country as immigrants, and that's how we ended up in Youngstown, Ohio. So when we talk about refugee resettlement, I think we need to really be sure that people understand, this is a legal process. People are vetted very intensely before they come in. They're granted that status coming into the United States. So this is something that is to build our community, not to infuse some negative element in there that they have, this kind of look at.
Yeah, at Thrive, we really have noted that the community has negative connotations in our work. We have recognized that for over 6 years now. And we really think that a lot of that comes from two different things. We think it comes from, people not knowing people and their stories. And so we really have challenged that by getting the word out and spreading those stories. We've convened people to come together for community conversations on immigration. We just had one in December at the UU Church in Youngstown, where we spoke from the Latin American perspective. We're looking forward to doing the Middle East or the Asian Americans perspective upcoming in March. And we're going to do those on a quarterly basis to try to get the community to understand what these perspectives are. Additionally, we're looking to advocate for the community to become more welcoming by putting in policies in place that align with the Welcoming America's welcoming standard, which we've been championing now for 5 years as well as a member of that organization.
And I would just add that from an economic standpoint, people often look at their pocketbook and make decisions and have biases based on that. And the data shows strongly that immigrants and refugees are proven to be entrepreneurial. They're 30% more likely to start a small business. Refugees and immigrants pay taxes, and declining tax bases locally in all of our communities is a quality of life issue for decades. And regions with more foreign-born people as a proportion correlate positively with higher economic growth. So I think those are all things we need to be selling, and there's data we can point to quantify that.
And I think to Guy's point about, manufacturers being supportive of working with, legally documented individuals, the manufacturers as a whole is interested in working with, targeted, underserved, underrepresented groups really across the board. And key to that effort is education, has been raised here, is understanding the different statuses and requirements and whatnot. But, looking at targeted populations that we regularly engage with that are also marginalized, returning citizens, justice involved, individuals suffering from substance abuse disorder. Those are also niche populations that it's important in part of this conversation that we consider ways that we can retain them and integrate them into our workforce. I was looking at some data earlier today, and even our participation of individuals in the workforce, particularly for the youth, actually for those that are disengaged from age 16 to 24 is twice the rate of the national average. So that's one indicator of a significant part of the population that's just not actively involved in the participating labor force, is actually engaged in working. And I think if we looked at those participation rates at these other marginalized populations, I think we would see similar challenges as well. So it's a multifaceted, multi-demographic. I think it's, when we start slicing and dicing, I think that we also need to keep in mind, we need to be keep in consideration of the other populations that are also in our community that can also be marginalized or misunderstood.
I just have to comment, and I applaud Business Journal for bringing us together to have this discussion. I got to tell you, that just helps me get better at what I'm trying to do. I didn't say repopulation a year ago ever. Now I'm in that space and I'm trying to get stronger. I appreciate learning from experts to my left and right and around the table. But it did point out a weakness, just that question did. I don't believe that message is getting out, and we have some one-pagers. We talk about this. We're quoted a lot of times, but nobody's talking about the process of legal immigration that we've talked about here and how we're going to bring the people back. So, but it just shed some light on an area that we at Eastgate and my partners have to get a little bit stronger when we message what we're really doing with repopulation.
So how are we going to do that, Guy?
Well, we put some additional resources into that effort, and so we did bring somebody on board to help us spearhead what we're doing in terms of growing the population, and part of it's going to have to be the messaging. We need to do messaging better all around. So not just in terms of properly messaging legal immigration, but properly messaging the opportunities in this community so that we can retain people, properly messaging domestically that we can return people. So, it's not all refugees and legal immigrants. There are a lot of other ways that we need to be engaged in order to grow our population. And to some extent, the immediate solution for our organization, the chamber, and our members is tapping into the underserved population that's already here, that is capable of working, capable of being educated, but is disconnected for some reason, whether it's the lack of public transportation, whether it's the lack of knowledge. But we do have a disengaged part of our population. There's also some messaging that just in terms of our youth around something as simple as this. We have research that shows that throughout Northeast Ohio, more girls than boys graduating from high school are going to college, but by and far, girls are not majoring in in-demand fields. And so we need to take a look at that. Why aren't we properly messaging to girls in high school about what jobs are going to be there for them when they get through college? So a lot of different ways that we need to really ramp up the messaging that this is a positive community.
So this isn't a one-year effort. I mean, this is a 10-year effort.
I'm not sure it's a 10-year effort. It might be more than that, but has to start somewhere.
So if we look at the issue of repopulation, we've talked about immigrants and refugees, the legal side of that. But that's just one small part. Isn't the real not keeping people here and bringing them back home?
That should be number one, is retaining what we have.
That's really where the action needs to be.
Yep.
How are we trying to bring people back home? In other words, at Christmas time, when families meet and the grandkids come or they come home and the hotels are filled because the families are getting together. How do we get that message to those people at that time?
So I'll jump in there. I think we're our own worst enemies because we don't talk about the good things going on in the area. The quality of life is a major issue for economic development. And our young people and the people left need to hear about the good things going on. Our proximity to Cleveland and Pittsburgh for sporting events and concerts, the Coviello Center, the amphitheater in Warren, the amphitheater downtown. The downtown's coming back. The investment in downtown Youngstown and investments in Warren and additional investments coming that we have to start with our urban centers and growing them out. I think if you look back, and I've been a lifelong resident here, people stayed away from your downtown areas. We got to bring people back. The housing in downtown Youngstown, there's a waiting list for apartments. That's great. But we don't talk about any of this. We don't talk about the good things. Everybody still wants to revert back to 50 years ago and talk about those days and the Rust Belt. And I vowed I'd never say that, but I'll just say it because people are that still comes up in conversations, and it drives me crazy. I think when we look at what we're doing, one of the efforts on the Mahoning River and getting the dams out and returning that river to a free-flowing, clean state, and the investment we have coming and have already started with the communities along the river to take advantage of a river and take advantage of services and parks and businesses along the river. We have seen Lowville invest, Struthers is investing. I'm working my way upstream. And we have additional money coming for the Youngstown's efforts along the river in Warren, and we continue to go north there. So it's all included. We have to bring everything together and talk about the good things. We need the people around here. I've met somebody in the banking industry said, "Oh, this place," something like, "Oh, come on now. We've been working hard for many years in this group, many of these people in the room for the last 3 to 5 years coming together to really talk about the good things in the industry coming to here and the jobs available and the cost of living. Buy a house here versus buying a house in Columbus or Charlotte." And I use those two examples because I tell everybody, I'm trying to stop what happened to my family. I got a son in Columbus, and I got a daughter in Charlotte. And why are they there? They've been gone for 10 years. So I think that we just don't talk about, and they weren't made aware of all the good things going on. And a lot of that has transpired in the last 5 to 8 years too. So it's going to be a community effort. We're certainly going to need our business partners, and we're going to need everybody talking about the good things going on here.
Brings us to the housing issue, though. Yes, there's a wait list for the downtown apartments, but we have a lot of housing stock that possibly could be rehabilitated. We have a lot of vacant houses. We don't have, and the rents are going way up for people who are on a low income. We have a housing issue here. How do we fix that? I mean, that's certainly out of your domain, Guy, but I mean, what do we do?
We're on it. I think we're on it.
So that's a problem everywhere. I was in Columbus a week and a half ago, in Washington just a couple of days ago. I'm hearing it from every community that attends these seminars and meetings. Eastgate's brought on a consultant to do a housing assessment and strategy for Mahoning and Trumbull counties. Part of that effort is a 6 to 9 month effort. We're going to see, we're probably at the midway point. We've been holding stakeholder meetings, and we have another one coming up in March. The consultant is bringing in the industry, developers, builders, bringing in the community leaders together and gathering information. Part of that assessment is to drive every street in both of those counties and gather the information on what we got to do. That's not just, and I think it's important to talk about the strategy is not just to build a new development in a suburb. It's talking about multifamily housing that we can get in our cities. How do we bring back and take care of some of the houses that need repair? I think one of the challenges we already know is the gap, the finance gap. To build a house, I'm just going to make some numbers up, $200,000 to build a house in Columbus, $200,000 to build a house in Youngstown. Youngstown sells for $300,000, sells for $400,000 in Columbus. Your builders are saying, why would I build a house here? So we're going to need help. We're going to need resources from the state or federal government to help close some of those gaps or incentivize building around here. We've also met this past, at the end of last year, we met with a developer that's in many of the communities, in many of the states, that take city blocks that were used to house your elementary schools in neighborhoods. Now we go on more of a campus look when we go to schooling in our cities. They take those, they clean it up. They build 40 to 60 multifamily units in that city block, get tax incentives, again, make it financially sound for them, but we get 60 new units. And then they say in every one of those communities that they've done that in, again, a 16-state footprint to see success. They see the housing around it investing because now there's new housing right in their neighborhood. So it's a challenge. We hope to get additional information from the stakeholders next month and roll out our strategy here in the spring.
Wow, that's a lot to take in. Any feedback on the housing issue?
Yeah, I'll speak briefly to Mercer County's situation. We're in the same boat. The cost to develop a house significantly outweighs the housing market. As Jim mentioned, it can cost a developer. I just spoke with a developer. He said a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 2,000 square foot home, just the shell of it alone, it comes in as starting at about 120,000. So that doesn't include gas, water, electric. That doesn't include installation of appliances, doesn't include anything, just the shell of the building. So it's very easy for that bill to rack up to $250,000 in an area where, you know, our average income is about $55,000. Selling a $300,000 home just doesn't make sense. We really can't fill that void. So we really need help from, you know, the state really to help mitigate that gap between housing development and the market cost. That's really our weak spot right now.
Is any help coming anywhere?
So what Jake and Jim referred to, it's on our public policy radar. We need the Pennsylvania and Ohio state governments to help our communities that have suffered significant population loss and have low property values. You know, we brag about affordable housing, but that's not working in our favor right now, because the value of the home after you build it is less than what it costs to build it. So you're not going to get a builder here. So we need incentives to incentivize the building. What we're seeing, especially with a lot of the job creation in Lordstown at Altium Cells and Foxconn, is we're seeing people buy and build homes about 40 minutes away. Places like Hudson and Stowe, where they get an ROI where you can find a builder. And that's not helping our community. It's not really building up our tax base and creating an economy here with the income from those workers. So public policy has to change. Public policy also needs to change around what young people want. Throughout our community, all of our communities, we have minimums, minimum acreage, minimum square footage, minimum distance from your neighbor. And what we're seeing from the younger generation is they want walkability. They don't want those kinds of minimums. They want small, and they want to walk to the entertainment. They prefer to walk to work. And so, you know, we're having to go back and rethink our building codes, our zoning codes, and things like that.
I'm asking Angelica and Chris, what are you seeing from the people you serve in terms of the housing need?
Yeah, so, excuse me. Last year, we served about 780 families, and I would say a good chunk of those families were looking for homes. They came here and they couldn't find a place to stay, a place to live. We know of a few families that came to the area, and then they ended up leaving because they couldn't find somewhere, you know, safe to stay. And so we've had to do a lot of referrals to just housing, and so we see a great need. We see a lot of people facing homelessness, families, mothers with their children in their cars, sleeping in their cars because they don't have a place to stay. And so we are not able to accommodate them. And so all we can do is refer them. That's all we can do. We normally refer them to just temporary housing, Catholic Charities as well.
Yeah, if I could dovetail off of Angelica, most of the calls that we get have something to do with housing, whether it's rental assistance, preventing an eviction, getting into housing because they're homeless or unstably housed. And what people don't understand, a third of the population that we serve that we consider homeless, I like to use unstably housed, because a lot of people are doubled up or they're staying with somebody. They're a minute away from saying, you can't stay here, my landlord's going to kick you out or whatever. A third of those people are employed. They're working. Another third are probably on some kind of fixed income, whether it's disability or Social Security or something like that. So the one thing we need to talk about is that the connotation of what a homeless person is not, it's not the person pushing a, grocery cart down the sidewalk. It's a lot of unstable housing in the area. What we do when people come in for our assistance, there's two important questions. How did you get in this situation, and what are you going to do? If we assist you, what are you going to do from here? And when we do budgets with people, when we look at the numbers, I mean, putting it in front of them, and somebody mentioned rental costs have gone up. People's income has not kept pace with that. So, you're looking at somebody that's maybe making, $1,000 a month and their rent is $700. Just do the math on what people can afford. And a lot of these people are working and they're trying to make ends meet, or they're trying to get jobs, and making those numbers work with rental assistance, trying to prevent people from being evicted and contributing further to that housing crisis is just really important. It's a lot of the challenges that we're all facing.
Yeah, we recognize there's not one solution to this. There has to be solutions at every level. So giving incentives to developers is one way, but we also see efforts like what Youngstown Neighborhood Development Corporation is doing and rehabbing some of our current stock, or what YWCA is doing and rehabbing some of the buildings over on the north side to put people in. We see those as viable for welcoming people into our community as well. We visited places like Erie, where we see resettlement agencies are developing relationships with landlords in the community, where they're giving them incentives to bring in people, to reduce having multiple families in one house, giving opportunities for families to rent and have pathways to ownership. Programs like that we're championing all over our community.
It's interesting. You say they're working with the landlords. Here, we see an awful lot of out-of-town people buying up these properties and jacking the rents way up. A lot of them are being sold through tax liens and so forth. That's a big issue. And I don't see any way to control that, to stop that from happening.
I think that's policy. I think, there has been some concrete changes to policy in our communities already, where we saw people being taken advantage with varying rents and things like that in the past. I think YNDC in action really worked hard to see if some of those policies change. I think it's going to take more of that.
And it's also, talking about the housing, we at NVMC recently convened a roundtable of community-based organizations to talk about barriers that job seekers face. And one, of course, is housing, and having housing that is proximate to their place of employment, because they don't have stable transportation, because we don't have public transportation in this community. So that's part of the issue as well. You may be offered a well-paying job or a decent-paying job at Altium or TJX or one of these other locations, but you need to be able to live in some proximate to that facility. And you can't build a house in Solon or Hudson because you're not in management, you're an hourly employee. And maybe you can't afford a car, or you're unstable. So that's part of it as well, is the location of our housing stock as well.
And one of the things that we've noticed in visiting other communities is that when people come into a community, they really do want to be close to all the services they might need. And so that's why we really have been championing this town center model of development. And I think it's been successful in a lot of other communities. And we're seeing it here locally in Columbiana. While Columbiana is very different than up in Youngstown, the town center model, where all the services are in one place and you build housing around it, has really worked, because immigrants and refugees, especially coming into our community, are used to that in the places they're coming from. They're used to communal living. And so, we champion that as a process as well.
When you say Columbiana, you're referring to Firestone?
Yeah, kind of like that model.
That's
and there's some
upscale.
development, I think, that's going to be coming in Warren as well, town center model there.
If it happens.
Yeah, if it happens. Mm-hmm.
Nobody else wants to say anything about housing? Jim, I think you want to say something, or no?
No, I think I covered it. Again, that's something that I never thought that I'd be doing in my career, is working on housing repopulation. But we're just trying to help our communities and work with our partners. And I think we're getting better at everything that we're trying to do. Bringing this type of roundtable, it was nice when I came in here. Everybody kind of knew each other already, because we've had these discussions and we're starting. But we're all learning. Well, half of us are learning most, but this other half probably understand this a little bit better, but we're learning, we're getting better. I think the only way we'll be successful is this kind of collaboration. I do also think that we continue to need the support of the business community, and we have it, but we got to reach to them a little bit deeper on some of our efforts here. Certainly when it talks about, and I don't want to get off on a tangent from housing, but when we talk about retaining people and repopulating the area and challenging our businesses to hire more interns and bring more people into their offices and keep them here.
Well, that's why the Chamber has a whole repopulation effort, and we do too, and we're partnering up. Did you want to say something, Guy?
No, I just think there's opportunities to get creative around public policy, especially in terms of housing. We've had some very early conversations about tax incentives for employers who would make the down payment on a house for their employees, and then the employer gets a tax credit for that. If you think about it, if the down payment, and again, I'm talking about, higher end workers, not higher end, but higher paid workers, and, a new house is going to cost $400,000. And you're looking at an $80,000 down payment. And so if the employer, what we would like to see is the employer makes that $80,000 down payment and forgives, an eighth of it, or, a tenth of it every year for 10 years, or an eighth of it every year for 8 years, whatever it is. And then that retains that employee. And then we want the state at the same time to say, okay, for doing that, we're going to give the employer some sort of tax, maybe tax credit, maybe tax deduction, some kind of tax break, induce people to come here, take the jobs, build the house, and so forth. We'll also have conversations around tuition forgiveness. And I know the state's looking at a model, they're running the numbers to see what's the right amount of cap and what's the right number of years. But the theory is, if we can take, a 1/7 of your tuition and pay for it every year for the next 7 years, your loan, at the end of 7 years, there's a good chance that you may have gotten married in that time. There's a good chance you may have bought a house in that time. There's a good chance you may have kids by then. And the odds of you now picking up and leaving are pretty minimal. And so we've been talking with state leaders about those kinds of incentives as well.
Are those things advancing, or are they just in the discussion stage?
We're in the discussion stage in terms of just, what's the right number, and what kind of cap do we need to have on those kinds of things, but progressing.
Where do efforts stand on establishing tools such as the Office of Repopulation and a bilingual website that coordinates community information?
Well, the Office of Repopulation is part of the funding opportunity we're looking for with the Appalachian Community Grant Program. That was money made available from the DeWine administration. It was $500 million set up for the local development districts of Appalachia. There's only 4 in the state of Ohio. Eastgate's the lead on the one that covers Mahoning, Trumbull, and Ashtabula County. We submitted an application for $155 million. After a year of planning, put that application in. Last December, we're awaiting word. They kicked the announcement out till the first or second week of March. It was going to be the first, second week of February because they were inundated with applications. I think they claimed after awarding some planning money for the first year, around $420 million available, and they got requests of almost $2 billion. We feel very strong with our effort there. We came together as a region. We submitted, Eastgate was the lead applicant that included 41 projects for $155 million, but in that was money aside for a welcome center to establish it and get it up and running. Now, that's not sustainable after a couple of years, but we would look to state funding to continue that effort and other opportunities for that effort. But we feel very good about where we're at for our 41 projects, and hopefully we have a good announcement here in the very near future.
I see we're running short on time and folks want to get going, so let's have some final thoughts and we'll go around the table. Emil, we'll begin with you.
I think everybody brought their expertise here today, so I just will reinforce on the housing issue, the need for state and federal subsidy to make the numbers work in the valley, and the removal of barriers. Like Guy said, that zoning issue is a national phenomenon. It's an American thing to build single-family detached homes, and now we need to build a little denser, a little closer to transit, a little closer to jobs and services to make this work.
Chris?
2 things. To the last question, Thrive Mahoning Valley does currently operate a bilingual resource guide. That's how we started 6 years ago. It's on our website at thrivemv.org. This year, we're expanding the language offerings to include 5 more languages, hopefully, and to expand the offerings into a print guide for Youngstown City School students and families. One of the things I want to close on is I think these 3 R's, the receiving, the returning, and the recruiting, we have to think of them as cyclical. I think I'm on a cusp of young and old a little bit at 42. I think our young people want to be in vibrant communities where they have a lot of different options as far as food and services available to them. And so I think if we attract immigrants and refugees to our community, our young people are going to want to stay here because there's more vibrancy, there's more opportunities that when it comes with immigrant and refugees businesses. And so I want to impart that on everybody here today, and welcome and invite everyone to join us as we meet at OCCHA on a monthly basis as part of an immigrant coalition that we're calling the Newcomers Network. We've had about 6 meetings so far, and those continue on a monthly basis, and we'd like to invite everybody to come to that as well.
Yeah, I think it's evident that repopulation is a top priority in Western Pennsylvania, Eastern Ohio. We see a lot of partners coming together to collaborate and find solutions to the needs in our area. Housing is a top priority, whether it's the solution is some state and federal support to help lower those costs, or the building of townhouses as that next step for young professionals stepping into the workforce, or retirees stepping down and vacating these homes with lots of land that took a lot of effort to maintain. But it's great to see all these different members of the community pull together in support of repopulation.
I think, in the last 50 years, we've been losing 7 people a day. And we really need to all come together to reverse that trend. And it's going to take all the R's: retaining, returning, recruiting, receiving, and then when we're receiving, resettling those folks and really being a welcoming community and really focusing on glass half full for those folks as well. And we all know the gem that we have here, and really showing that off and being that welcoming community. And I think that if we want to bring people back here, we all have to be willing to work on really all 5 of those R's.
I totally agree with everything that's been said. I think it is a very multifaceted issue. I think having these roundtables and bringing people together as have been brought together with this topic of repopulation is important. Lisa used the term earlier about baby to Bubba, I think you said. And I think it's important that we look at all aspects of the community. I mean, certainly retaining young people and keeping them here is one thing, but I think it's just the whole housing, employment, services, entertainment, community are very important to keep. And one of the things, 2 of the things I think Catholic Charities really is looking at is being that welcoming, part of that welcoming community, but also looking at how people can be self-sufficient. And that's something every day we are trying to work with on the people that come to us is, how do we be self-sufficient in this community?
I think today we've had an opportunity to talk about a number of the challenges, and as Guy mentioned, even we were talking about how long it would take to establish an office of repopulation, to really become that community like Solon and like York has become for repopulation in terms of recruiting and resettling and whatnot. And that's a longer play, but something that I think that because of time, maybe we didn't have enough time to spend discussing, is what can we do today to help retain the youth in our community, or even those that are mid-career that may be looking to migrate. Jim talked about, we can be our own worst enemy, because we're not just, as we walk out the door today, talking about what a great community this is. What are actionable things that we can do today? What are some immediate things? Policy issues and tax credits, and those can all be part of the solution, but those are longer term plays. So what can we do right now to start addressing the problem today? And I think that that's something that we need to come around more, because I know that we're all doing things individually, but I think we can be stronger and more cohesive in those efforts.
Yeah, I concur with what everybody's commented on today. It made me think back when I came to Eastgate 8 years ago. I try to tell the staff, and I try to portray that in everything that we tackle. Don't be afraid to swing and miss, and if you need help, bring in expertise. I think those are a couple of things that I think the people in the valley were afraid of in the past, but I think that you see when you get this group of strong-spirited individuals and organizations together, we're starting to see some of the fruits of our labor and successes. One thing that really we talk about when we go to Columbus for funding, when we go to DC for funding, is the partnerships we have, the team effort, and really a unified vision. So if we're going to continue to be successful and be more successful, it's groups like this working together on that same vision to be successful. I've learned some things, made some notes today that I wasn't even aware of, but that's okay. That's how I get better, and that's how the team gets better, and this is a great team.
So I think we need to work together to set ourselves apart, keeping in mind that the competition is fierce. When Emil talked about we're trying to emulate some other communities, that's our competition. This workforce shortage, population shortage is nationwide, and it's especially challenging throughout Ohio. And so, keep in mind when we talk about bringing boomerangers back here, other communities are tapping into people here saying boomerang back to their towns. And so this competition is fierce. When we announced Kimberly Clark, I had somebody stand next to me say, well, they're all going to come here now because we've got the good paying jobs. And I'm like, no, everybody has good paying jobs. It has to be quality of life. We have to do something that's going to set us apart. And so let's not lose sight of the fact that we have fierce competition out there.
Well, I think our community has potential. I believe we have the potential to retain, to attract newcomers, and to be successful at it. And I think one of the first steps is coming together as a community and having these conversations, and just making a clear plan, educating the newcomers, but not only the newcomers, but our community, educating and just having that clear plan. What are we going to do? But we do have potential. And I personally I grew up in the city, and I left for 14 years and I came back, because my family was here, because it was a cheaper place, a cheaper option to raise a family. And compared to other big cities, it's a place where you can raise your family, even though we have our struggles as a community. So I just think, this is great what we're doing here today, coming together, having the conversations and making sure there are plans, and now how are we going to put this plan into action? And so OCCHA is glad to be part of that.
I want to thank you all. This has been absolutely fabulous. I've learned so much, and I'm so thankful for you taking the time.
The Business Journal Roundtable series is sponsored by iSynergy, creative digital advertising.